Okay, well, we're in week 3, which marks the halfway point for this class. And I want to remind you that all assignments for weeks 1, 2, and 3 will be, I will not be accepting them after week 4 is completed. After week 4 is completed, I will not be accepting 1, 2, and 3 unless you've made some arrangements with me. So remember that because we're at the going into the second half of the course. So anyway, I wanted to clear up something. Um, it appears last week that this is the first time I've done this, and I don't know if it's a combination of things here. I know I've been having trouble with this shoulder that I have, but at any rate, the key word last week, it was brought to my attention that somebody guessed it. Well, that was Trinity. Actually, they actually mentioned your name because I mentioned that you got it, and they said I didn't say the keyword, and they didn't see it in the chat box. Well, the chat box, as those of you who know who looked at the videos, you don't see it, and I don't put it in the chat box. I don't put the chat box in purposely because I don't want students to go in and look at the recording and then use the chat box for the keyword without even paying attention to it. I used to do that and I found out that was happening. So now I eliminate the chat box when the recordings come out. So um, last week, this past week, week 2, I ended up, as you all know, receiving an email on Sunday giving you rehabilitation as my key. And so I got it. So I had a couple of students who had it wrong earlier, and I left them blank until um, Monday, just give them a chance to put the correct one in. And then I just saw an email from a student who wanted to know why they got a 0 when they gave me the incorrect keyword when I said I was given a break. The break was I was given um, the key word for the first time to everybody in an email. I've never done that before. So I did that to balance the field. And almost everybody got it but one person and got it in. But one of the things that I do say is this, is that usually my key will have to do with something that I talk about during the lecture. And a couple students picked up that I talked about rehabilitation a whole lot. You mentioned it a whole lot. I think that's why you were able to get it, Trinity, because of that, or those guys who were in the lecture. But anyway, my point being is that generally the key phrase is easy to determine by listening to the lecture. And if a person's listening to just for the keyword, uh, they might they might not always get it right because of the fact that I mentioned it several times and talk about it. So anyway, I just wanted to say that at the beginning of today's lecture. I will make sure that it's clear what the keyword is this time, but once again, I always will give you guys a chance to guess um, at the end here. So, all right, so let's go ahead and share my screen. All right. So here's the information that you already know. Skip through that. Remind you once again that the rubrics are in each written assignment, which we'll go over. Um, so we got really basically in this class 2 more lectures next week and the week after, because there is no lecture in week 6. So you should remember that. Okay, and then let's just quickly go over and look at the course calendar. Okay, this is where we are today, reminding you that your reading started on Monday the 20th, and if you clicked on it, you would see the details in the announcement. I point you back to the announcement, and then your initial post states prison programming was due yesterday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, and then your reply post is due Saturday the 25th, and then Sunday your written assignment sentencing fact sheet, and then finally your quiz, which you are well aware of that, how that works. You get 3 times to do it, and then your key phrase. Okay, and then we'll be at the 27th. Notice that um, you have coming up here August approaching. So when you get to the 2nd, you'll have just one more week because your class ends on the 11th. 11th. 11th of August, not the 14th, not the 15th, not the 16th, but the 11th. So students are well aware, because every week I make sure that I mention that. Okay. So now let's go back to the course homepage. Course home. And let's look at the announcement for the week. So this week we're going to deal with the roles of prisons, punishments, and programming. Chapters 4, 14 of American Corrections, which you have previously been sent the PowerPoints and additional information. Remind you again that the PowerPoints and additional information are sent to you to help you with your weekly understanding of the module, and also so that you don't have to keep reading over and over the full chapters of your textbook, and gives you some information that can stick to you and help you with your assignments, and particularly dealing with your quiz. So institutional programming changing philosophies, core rehabilitative programs, determinate and indeterminate sentencing activity, and then your all important vocabulary review, which is really for you, but I just kind of like sampled it to show you how it works every single week. Discussion assignment, again, states prison programming, again, repeating initial post due last night, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, and reply post Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And finally, complete the written assignment, sentencing fact sheet, and then, of course, your quiz. And you know what my motto is all about now. Okay, so now let's go right into our module. Take a look at the assignments here. If you have any questions at any point, always feel free to type them in the chat box. I will slow down and stop and make sure we get them. So you discussed it in post. Discussion topic, programming for states, prisons, and what is that exactly is it? What types of programs are available in prison, include the goals and purpose of the programs, your thoughts as to which programs are effective and why, include indicators as to whether or not they reduce recidivism, then your recommendations. So in your initial post, you're dealing with an online search of your state's prison programming, your state's prison programming, and post this information. Then in the reply post, you're going to respond to another state that's a different one than yours and explain why you agree or disagree with that. Very straightforward. Okay. And then citations and references are welcome, but I'm not dogmatic about them. Don't worry about them. If you don't put them in there, don't worry about them. If you put them in there, that's awesome. I say that because it's a good habit to develop. And so I have no problems with how you put them in there. So don't stay up all night worrying about those kinds of things. Secondly, the written assignment, a sentencing fact sheet. What is a sentencing fact sheet? And it tells you in the assignment. So basically, what we're looking at is comparing determinate to indeterminate sentencing. And indeterminate and determinate sentencing is something that we're going to talk about a little bit. You've been asked to create a fact sheet. And what you're going to be doing is as if you were preparing something for people who are going to vote on whether or not they wanted indeterminate or determinate sentencing in their state, providing the pros and cons of each of the two. So create a one-page fact sheet, defines each type of sentencing, determinate and indeterminate. Please, good people, citations in the body to support your statements and references at the end. Okay, we already talked about that, but I'm going to talk about it again. Include specific elements of each of the sentencing. So don't just say determinate sentencing, talk about some elements of it. Talk about some elements of indeterminate sentencing. Again, support your statements with citations in the body and have references at the end. Yes and no. And the reason why I say yes and no, because it depends on how much you want to write. The key thing is it's going to be a one-page document and that you're going to provide answers to the questions. Here's what I always ask students. If you read your paper, did you satisfy the requirements of the rubric and the module? Ask yourself that before you submit it. Review it yourself. Check it over yourself. Does that answer your question? Okay, because the key thing that I don't want, see, again, I don't, I'm more concerned about you're giving me information. What you're going to learn and you're going to develop as a student that transfers hopefully into your professional careers as it has with mine is not how much information I provide, but did I provide enough information for the person to read and understand the principles of what the project is intended to pass on. In other words, are you, as using one of our transferable skills, are you communicating with your audience? That was quick. Let me go back and read that. I think I know what she said. Yeah, exactly. That is correct. Do what you are capable of and not what you have time for. Yeah, make sure. It's very important. See, and like I said again, a lot of students figure out says, man, this paper is it's not a full page. Okay, dag, what can I add to it? If you were trying to get the information yourself, you ask yourself, What did I miss? What did I leave out that's important to get the point across? And the answer is usually if you put in enough information so that that person gets a clear understanding. Sometimes you know what you can do if you have time, have somebody else in your family to read it. You know, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, somebody, maybe even a friend, not a classmate, by the way, but somebody in that scenario. It's funny I said that because I remember I had a class one time I taught with a husband and a wife, and they both were in the same class. And I used to kind of laugh about it. I said, okay, I guess in a way you get a mulligan on this one because you're husband and wife, but I've never had a sibling that was in the same class at the same time. Okay, those kind of things. So yep, you'll get it. It'll be comfortable to you. It's not something you worry about after a while. You'll satisfy the requirements naturally. Uh, so it's going to be a one-page fact sheet. Okay, now pay attention to these bullet points, though. Define each type of sentencing, and then what are the elements of each of the type of sentencing. Don't just give me a element, give me the elements. There's more than one element in those, and I know really well about this because I wrote a research paper for my state, Illinois, when I was in law school in 1978, and we went from indeterminate to determinate sentencing. And that was actually, as you guys may know, you do know about what happened with me and my parents, and the amount of time that the guy ended up getting. That's because of the indeterminate uh, sentencing setup. And so when I had the opportunity in law school to work with the first major change in Illinois, um, called House Bill 1500. And those of you who do research, you will discover the elements about it, and you'll learn about how and why we changed it. You would not realize it, but some of the language that you'll run across is language that I incorporated in my papers that I provided the general counsel, um, by the name of Jim Bagley, and also uh, of the House in the state of Illinois, and that 77 was the first major change to the Illinois Criminal Code of 1961. Now, so I had a chance to participate in that. So anyway, what I'm saying to you is that that is going right down my alley, dealing with determinate and indeterminate sentencing, and I'll talk about that a little bit too as well today. Explain at least two pros, two things that are good, two things that may be bad potentially, about at least each sentence. And you know what? It says at least two. Some if you do two, if you do three or four, I don't care. That's great. I appreciate that. Um, what I want you guys to learn to do, here's what I want you to do in your mind. When you get an assignment, think of it in terms of it's your job to share information about a certain area, a topic, and you want to do a good job of doing that. And so that people will consider you uh, an expert, or at least a person who's um, done a lot of due diligence in terms of looking at the topic. That's why I want you to approach all your written assignments. And if you begin to approach them this way in this class, in other classes, you'll you'll be ahead of the curve. I was always guilty of providing extra information. I really was. I mean, seriously, except I remember I had one professor that gave us a certain number of pages that he wanted, and I would, go over it. And he said, so I had a discussion with him, And he agreed with me. He said all he was really doing was trying to teach us to follow directions. He said, but he appreciated the fact that we were in law school and that our minds and creative juices would go beyond what maybe even he might even think, but we would support it with our information. Back in those days, it was not citations and references. In those days, it was footnotes that we had to do. So anyway, little point of contention. I'm reorganizing your thinking process, guys. I'm trying to get you ready so that life is much easier for you in school. The next point, need I say, and I will talk about in a minute and when I get to rubric, provide evidence from credible sources. And we've already known and determined what types of sources are credible. Most of the sources that if you use them from our library and learning center are credible sources. If you use them outside of that, you do stand a chance, but be the judge. Ask yourself, is this imbalanced? Is this biased? Is it good information? Is it valuable information? And you'll be able to utilize it. But you will not get, you'll see when we get to the rubric again. I think you already know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it again over and over. And I have to apologize to those who get it right away, but trust me, I have to keep saying this because it is the difference in the A and B students and the C, D students. So support your statements, support it with credible sources. Yours truly, as an expert in dealing with this stuff as your professor, but if I'm going to provide information, I provide where I got the sources from, information from, to give credit to those individuals. That goes back to integrity. And I sincerely encourage that for each of you. Provide stated ideas with professional language. Well, that goes without saying. All right. So you know the grammar and all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, run your papers through Grammarly. You know about that. And then it talks about a brochure, which you can set it up in brochure form. And all you're really doing and it answers questions about how to do that. It must be what kind of document? What kind of format do I want? What system of document do I want? Yes, Word all day long. No PDF. Yep, Microsoft Word, which is Word. Yeah. I do not. I mean, and I at least have one or two students who tell me that they put it in Publisher, they put it in all kind of forms, and they get a 0 because of the fact that I keep saying it. And see it right here. Save your assignment as a Microsoft Word document. It is right there, and this is standard language for all assignments that you um, take here in this school. Okay. And why do we do that? So that we can make sure that we can run it through and see if we can edit it or Grammarly. Before we leave this, let's take a look at the rubric. Of course, reminding you it's due the 26th. Okay. I said this before and I'll say it again. Which column is the column that you're going to focus on? Mastery. Yeah, mastery. And you know what? If you always get into that habit, then you're going to realize, and if it's only one column, usually that is mastery. Advanced or exceeds demonstration of the criteria. If you read the captions at the top, it's thrown into your head, say, oh, I want to get an A or a B. I want to be in that last column. But if you just want to, pass barely, Just keep staying in emerging, and your scores will be very, 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 very low. Competence, you'll start to get in a C, and then in the next one, you'll be close to B, but you'll be looking right at it. So I want you to develop the habit, and this is what I teach my students to do, excellence. Because I'm going to tell you something, whenever I do a job, people remember me. Oh, yeah, yeah. Richard, I just asked him to take me off of I was doing domestic violence course program, but because my shoulder was bothering me and so many taps, and I said for the next 4 to 6 weeks I'll be in physical therapy. Could you please um, uh, take me off of that assignment because I'm not going to be able to do what I'm known for doing? And they said right away, we know your work because it precedes you. That's what you want to do. You know, I got students that when I see their names, and I've had them many times, and most of you in here, this is the first time, but I'll remember your names. Um, but the point of the matter is that when you begin to do well, I'll be able to say, "Oh yeah, that's Jennifer," uh, or that's Trinity. Just throwing out a few of the names of you guys that are here. I always ask, where the heck are the guys? But anyway, that's a whole nother story. I sometimes get disappointed with the guys, and then they wonder why the females excel. Anyway, that's a soapbox statement. Anyway, I'm off of that one. But anyway, the truth of the matter is that I want you to master the topic. Two reasons. Number one, I want it to become, I want you to start building in a direction that you're going to make a life on. That's what I did. In college, I was preparing for practicing law all the way through to my first class to my last law school class, and then even after. And so as a result, I was in demand. Okay. So anyway, 20 points for exemplary description describing this type of sentencing with details on the elements from each type of credible resource. So the elements of the sentencing types. So what are the sentencing types? Real quick. What are the sentencing types? Just from what you already know. How many are there? Okay, there's only two. That's all right. Don't worry about the spelling part. We all do that because we're trying to get it in so fast. But yeah, it's determinate or indeterminate sentencing. Those are the sentencing types. So you'll get 20 points for exemplary description of that type with thorough details. You thought mandatory? No, no, it's determinate or indeterminate. Mandatory is part of actual determinate. And you when you hear me talk about determinate sentencing, you'll you'll get it. You'll get it. So it doesn't create a third one. It actually falls under determinate. So there's only two types of sentencing: determinate or indeterminate sentencing. And if you go back to your um, to the module here, you'll see that that's what we're talking about: determinate or indeterminate sentencing. Okay. All right. That's fine. With credible resources. The pros and cons of each sentencing type. So, an exemplary list of pros and cons with supporting evidence. And then finally, here and here. So, by the way I'm saying this, does this kind of like help it stick to your brain a little bit there? Good, good. I want to, sometimes we overthink stuff. So it's really an easy assignment. Okay. It's all about determinate and indeterminate sentencing. So that's the rubric there. And then of course you know about the bottom part. But going back, it says each type of sentencing. See how many, just reminding you. You see that, Trinity? Okay, great, no problem. Um, it's all right when you're wrong in school, because then you have your professor to help you. But when you're out there working and you're employed, the employer looks at you like, maybe this person not the right person. No, no, let's fix this now. So yeah, so there's only two types, determinate and indeterminate. The first line, it tells you, and then include specific elements of the type of sentence. One of the elements of determinate sentencing has to do with mandatory. Okay. All right. Any questions about the assignment? Well, you're pretty clear. Everybody good with it? Okay. And make sure you have your APA formatted stuff there too as well. Okay. Um, yeah, yeah, because yeah, because it says explain the pros and cons, provide supporting evidence, and then you can then talk about, what you like or don't like about it. You can do that. That's what's in your that's what's in your discussion post. But I will never take that away from you. But that's in addition to what you're doing. So, oh yeah, yeah. Explain why you like this and why you don't like it, and so forth and so on. So absolutely, any professor who says, "No, I don't want to hear your opinion," I don't think it's a good professor. That's my philosophy and opinion, because my job is to get you guys to go beyond what already is there. Sometimes changes come about, and actually, to be honest with you, when I wrote my paper to the legislator and to the General Counsel James Bagley regarding House Bill 1500, and changing indeterminate to determinate sentencing, I explained reasons why I thought that it was good. And guess what I used? I used what happened with the guy who killed my mom and dad, as ending up with 3 years for murder. So, that was my opinion based upon something that's factual. So, yeah, of course. Uh, Not necessarily. Not necessarily, because it's a brochure. You're given both sides, and then let the voter decide. Um, you're not. How should I say it like this? Because it's a fact sheet, and because the project requires you to be um, something to educate the voters, um, and then the pros and cons. You try to stay as neutral as possible. That's a good point. If this was not a sentencing fact sheet and a paper other than that, I would say yes. Good question. That was excellent. Very good. Anything else before we leave that? I like you guys. You guys really asked some really good questions. Appreciate that. All right, quiz. Everybody know how that works. You get 3 bites out of the apple. Don't get used to that, because this is the only course that I know of that has it. I don't think there are any other courses that you're going to be taking along the way. I know none of the ones I teach have 3 bites out of the apple. When they first did this, I was shocked And I asked why, and they explained to me why. I said, okay, I can see that. So you have 3 of those. And remember, I first week allowed people to get in Monday, but I'm not doing that this time. Or did I do it week 2 as well? So, and then your live classroom uh, phrase will come in. By the way, speaking of grades, your week 2 assignments will be graded by the end of this week. The thing about this course, though, is that your assignments that you do on each week are independent of what you do the next week. So as I was telling one student, they want to know how I do on my second assignment, so I'll know what I need to do on the third. I already repeat the same thing, and that is make sure that you have your credible sources and so forth and so on. But the key thing that you, just for your information, is that your grade for week 2 will be in by Saturday. All righty. So let's talk about, for the next 20 some odd minutes or less, the topics. So why prisons? Why punishment? Why programming? And we believe that there are 3 things that you should be able to understand. The philosophies of punishment in the correction system, the pros and cons of determinate and indeterminate sentencing, and explain the development of institutional programming. So there's philosophies of punishment in the correctional system. We're going to talk a little bit about that right now. And one of my favorite. So anybody know what my favorite philosophy on programs as far as prison's concerned? I'm smiling. Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's it. Bar none. I have had so many students who leave my class. First, they come in different, and they come in, they deal with rehabilitation. But I said, what is so important? Nah, I'm getting ahead of the curve. That's all right. Let's just jump into this. You'll see. Um, Institutional programming, changing philosophies. So basically, under the old system, I call it old anyway, we dealt with punishment. You do something, you serve some time, and that we lock you up, and then we let you out when we think that you have learned your lesson. It's like a timeout, basically, uh, except there are other things that went along with that. And so it reached the point that punishment was not really working so much. Punishment was not one of the things that you think about in terms of deterrence. Does punishment alone deter crime or persons from committing crime? No, it does not. It deters them during that period of time, maybe from committing crimes. And the reason why I say that is because, as you know, and I know, that there's crime that takes place within the walls of prison. In fact, I always call prison the place where you can get your degree in criminology, or how to become a real good criminal, because you learn it from those with doctoral degrees, not a, in quotes, doctoral. They didn't, uh, yeah, because they get exposed to hardcore people, and they teach them a way of life that they didn't have. You might have made a mistake in going in there, but then you come out with this new stuff on top of that, and you've graduated to a higher level, and it becomes something that you uh, do for maybe your life. And then you become a recidivist, and then you keep coming back, or either you're killed, one or the other that takes place. And so you teach it generationally, whereas I have said before, when I started practicing in 78, and by the time I retired in roughly 2000, I had represented generations and families of individuals going back even to juvenile, where the reason why they were who they were is I had represented their parents or older uncles, cousins, those kinds of things. And so that kind of thing. So anyway, so um, it said that the punishment was barbaric and not humane, and that it began to shift away from punishment to the penitentiary philosophy, which is on its way to rehabilitation. And in the penitentiary philosophy, person would be isolated to think about it. In other words, that's what timeout's supposed to do. Give you time to think about what you did wrong, give you some thoughts, and then you would repent. So that is why that the word penitentiary is for penitent. That is the idea that you will say, okay, let me think about while I'm in here what I did wrong. Realistically, they discovered that that wasn't really such a real deal either. Um, because actually what was happening was the opposite of what we talked about earlier. Individuals were learning how to become hardcore criminals. But so it began to change, and then it says by 1870, prison reformers realized that isolation did nothing to address the behavior, um, and started deciding, well, we got to move toward reformation. And so, in order to do that, they realized you not only need to lock you up or take you out of the system, make you serve some time, but we need to educate you, get you some education and training. And I've said this many times that it is cheaper to educate than to incarcerate, and that actually it's safer for society, I think, to educate and train individuals, give them a vocation or a trade, give them something to do to make an honest living. Um, uh, let's see what that question was. When does a lesson get learned in a generational family? Where does the criminal tie get broken? I feel that you are not only rehabilitating you, but a family. Well, the whole philosophy is this, is that when a person is in a family, they can make a choice of their own to choose a different style. I know many individuals who have relatives who have exposed them, and it gets to the old thought that some people think that you are a product of your environment. Well, I totally, I'm not going to go against that one. But the point of the matter is that unfortunately, that is something that takes place. But what happens is that someone or someone's within that environment decide this is not good, and when I'm going to do everything I can to change my future in terms of life. But there are still going to be some that still continue. So I have family members who are criminals, and I don't have we don't communicate. We don't see each other. We don't have barbecues together. We maybe see each other at a funeral or something like that, or if they're not incarcerated or something like that. But the point of the matter is that they know what I stand for because I developed my own independent agenda. So it's as my grandmother used to say, every tub has to stand on its own bottom, and we all have to individually learn to give account. And actually, that is the reason why we have what we call Department of Children, Family Services, or Protective Services for Children, is to try to get them out of those kinds of environments so that they can have an opportunity to see a different way of life. So it is very, very important. Okay. Does that address what you asked? Okay, very good. But that's a very, very good point because that is absolutely true. And so, education and training, I participated in a program called Probation Challenge with individuals who qualified for probation, who committed crimes that were not violent crimes, who had not received their high school diploma. And Probation Challenge was a program where the judge gave an opportunity for individuals who came before him to receive an opportunity to participate in this program and obtain their general education diploma, also referred to as a GED. And this was something that generally happened right along with the comment you just asked about, Jennifer, is that individuals for first time college students, or either some were first time high school degree people. You'll be surprised how often that has come about, and you've seen that. And so the point of the matter is that those individuals who got into those programs um, were less likely to be affected by the crime that they were exposed to, and realize that they'd see what happened to the individuals in their own lives from not uh, getting an education. As I say, knowledge is power, but it's only valuable if you use it. And so, in the training, same things. Many individuals who have come out of being incarcerated who are now barbers. They have, even in the jail, while people are waiting trial here in Cook County, a friend of mine has his own barber school that he operates there and teach these individuals, and they come out and they decide they want to get licensed and become licensed barbers. Hey, that that still begins to point them in the direction. Now, some people say, well, there are people who are still going to do that and commit crime. Of course there is, but you still want to encourage people, and that again, our system, uh, our financial institutions for prisons and jails are stretched because of recidivism. Okay, and now, but keep in mind once again, if a person has a drug problem or mental health problem, education and training alone is not going to help. Okay, so the key thing is to do that. And so it's recognizing that the we're moving uh, closer to the opposite side, that programming is very, 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 very important, and that, as it says here, the top priority of prisons is safety and security of the offenders and the staff. And then there's a debate on how that comes about. And so um, it and it reaches the point as to how, as it says, delivered. So we're dealing with punishment at the beginning and moving to rehabilitation. And as you begin to recognize and understand that um, there are uh, always going to be problems. And then, but you remember, as correctional, as this refers to, correctional professionals um, utilize this um, EBP, which is evidence-based practices, deals with the risk need and assessment, case planning, use of cognitive intervention, and it's getting into the minds of the individuals, and then uh, developing skills. And so we began to move towards things like restorative justice, where we are reaching the stage that the individuals need to be helped in the area where there's a problem. As it says at the beginning, restorative justice, people thought that, you know, restitution, community service was a slap on the wrist. But reaching a stage now to learn that it is an idea, as we say, is a philosophy that didn't originate here, as it says in New Zealand and Australia, and that we have reached a stage to understand the relationship between restorative justice and getting people back. Notice the restorative justice overlaps dealing with the community, the victim, and the offender. I always say that there are two victims. The offender is also a victim, and oftentimes they're a victim of the way that they were raised. And so restoration comes about in a number of ways. And when you start to help people, now keep in mind these crimes that fit under these category, we're talking about crimes that are not considered to be violent offenses, and that a lot of individuals are incarcerated because of what we call nonviolent offenses. So you can take a little bit more look about restorative justice. Yeah. All right. So now let's talk about rehabilitative programs, the core. What is it? What does it do? What is it supposed to do? And we deal with each of these points here, and let's just go down. And so we've reached the point where we look at as what we call the big four, the factors, the history of criminology, the attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, the peer associations, and the personality. What we're doing is we're beginning to focus on the individual and to try to take that individual and put them in point them in as I don't know if I've told you about my example. Let's think of a clock that at the top is 12 o'clock. Okay. Now that's where you are when you're in your worst state. You're bad when you're doing your own thing. But then you start to go through these programs, and the cognitive aspects of what they're doing, and working on helping you with educational programs, substance abuse programs, all kind of programs, religious programs, which our church participates in, helping individuals with community service. So you begin to move to 3 o'clock. Now, the problem with being at 3 is that at 3 o'clock, you can still see 12 o'clock. And so you're still able to see some of the things that you did, and might go backwards in terms of counterclockwise and go back to 3 to 2 to 1, and you end up back at 12, and you end up doing the same thing. But then we gradually move you further away to 4 to 5 to 6. So when we get to 6 o'clock, we're at the bottom of the clock. Now, to get there, you got two ways you can go. You can go back, or you can move forward. But the pivotal thing is keep a balance. And if you keep a balance, you're going to stay at 6. And what you're going to happen when you're at 6 is going to be a place where you totally are going to be helped, whether it's drugs that you have, mental health problems, educational, you need some mental health as a sexual offender, and then you're going to be introduced to religion, maybe, possibly, not necessarily the same one I believe in, but something that guides you and sends you in a new direction, and you do what I call go in a new direction. So you have a 180, and then you begin to take that 180 and go off and get further and further away. And as long as you're there, you see where you came from. And then if you start to go back up again to 7, you're approaching danger, because now you're heading back for where you came from. Okay, and so it'd be problematic for you, and you could end up with what you learned at 6, but then you're more influenced by what you knew from 1 to 5. I mean, from 12 to 5, and then you go to 7, 8, 9. Then by the time you get back to 12, you're a super criminal. Everybody kind of understand what I said? Any clarification, or you have any questions? Yeah, yeah. But the key thing is time. Yep. But the key thing is that put yourself on 6 and not on 12. Only reason I said 12 is because 12 is where you'd start, and 12 is like midnight, difference in day and afternoon and morning and changes. But by the time you get to 6, you're you're basically at a point where you're at a key period of time in your life. Uh, yep, you can move backwards or forward, but the key thing is the more solid that you focus on moving, not to 6, not the other direction, but to stay on 6 and use 6 as your launching pad to take you off of that clock, and then you take the ways. So anyway, so your education, your family support, again, yep, accountability, absolutely. Dealing with the substance abuse and your leisure and recreation. Okay. And then we start to deal with how the program is delivered. And then there's a opportunity for you to look at this, if you were to take a look at this video of how one state applied the techniques that I just got through talking about. All right, so I'm not going to go into more of the change agent intervention and those kinds of things. But the key thing is we want to get you rehabilitated, and we're going to utilize these steps to get you there. All right, who, what, and then how with the programming that's added. Okay, so now for the rest of the time, I want to talk about determinate and indeterminate sentencing. Um, so as we already talked about, punishment being, the cornerstone, and that all of the states have made some change depending on the philosophies of the sentencing. So what is determinate sentencing? Now, please, good people, these are starting points. I know some people are going to try to use these. I says, but yeah, but research them, look them up. Determinate sentencing involves pretty much dealing with the idea of cutting into recidivism. Support retribution. In other words, give you a time commensurate with the crime. So not 3 years for murder, okay? The legislature is who passes the determinate sentencing, and they determine a range of the sentencing. For example, Illinois has class X felonies, which range from 6 to 30. Somebody said, well, don't you have some discretion? Well, the key thing is what you don't realize is that there were times when the judges would go below that, but they can't go below that. And the other thing is that now they have taken away good time away from certain kinds of crimes, like aggravated assault or aggravated battery and those kind of things. So there's a specific period of time that is already up front, and you know what it's going to be. You know the idea that it's not going to go any lower and it's not going to go any higher. Now, what though has happened is that you could be charged with 2 counts of something, of 6 to 30, which means that, and they don't run consecutive. I mean, they run concurrent, they run consecutive, which means you finish one, you go to the other. And so your time could be more as a result. States can easily calculate for bed space because they know when a person is scheduled to be released, unless that individual gets into some more trouble. But generally, they have an idea, so they can begin to operate on that basis. Uh, States can monitor the trends and estimates of and commitment numbers and the length of sentences to plan for needed space. So it's supposed to help with overcrowding to a point. But the key thing is that you need to be aware of is that we now know how long that person will be in. Offenders are automatically released on the established date, or um, if there's some rehabilitative attempts, like for example, maybe receiving parole or something for really doing well. Indeterminate sentencing is um, takes rehabilitation into consideration, but so does this too. But the main focus here is that the determinate sentencing is really established primarily for major crimes, for crimes that should have received the commencement amount of sentences for the crime. All right, but indeterminate sentencing uh, would take rehabilitation into consideration right away. And you don't know how long the person's going to be in. And so they could be released pretty fast. And then the decision lies with the parole authority or parole board. Now, here, well, your question, I thought I saw was in the, did you ask me? Indeterminate sentencing becomes hard for victims. Yeah, it does, because you don't know when that person's going to come out. That is one of the problems with it. But you got to remember one thing with most indeterminate sentencing in the jurisdictions, what they have decided is that they wanted to use this method so that if they decide they want to lighten up the load of those individuals incarcerated, they can and they can't. Now, even in determinate sentencing phases for certain types of crimes, misdemeanors and things like that, individuals or non-violent offenses that individuals. Remember, many people commit crimes and based upon our determinate sentencing, um, from the use of drugs, or have had a problem with alcohol, or either they've had problems dealing with mental health that needs to be addressed. Okay, so so then that's what I want to say pretty much about determinate sentencing. So when I was working on that stuff, my idea was to make sure that if you commit the crime, you should do the time, and had to balance it between um, staying in there long enough to learn something, but also let you pay a penalty for it. But then the whole idea of determinate sentencing was to deal with the most serious of offenses, okay, where we have what we call the three strikes law. You all familiar with the three strikes law? Yep. It's we call it the rehabilitative, I mean not rehabilitative, habitual offender act, where individual commits three violent offenses. In some jurisdictions, I think like California, for example, it doesn't have to be violent offenses. I kind of have problems with that, but I think it has to deal with violent offenses, and so that individuals will receive longer periods of time. Okay. So anyway, you could take each of these and just quickly, because we're over our time, but I want to get this in. For determinate sentencing, I'm going to give you a chance to tell me release decision based on a determination that an individual has been rehabilitated. Is that determinate or indeterminate sentencing? See the word rehabilitated? It always puts it over there. See, release decision based upon determination that they have been rehabilitated. It's not 3 years or 4 years they have rehabilitated, but there's no fixed period. Issues with disparity are often prevalent. Determinate or indeterminate? There he goes over there. Disparity are prevalent. Once again, it's uncertainty. A fixed sentence, okay. Soon as you see that word fixed, utilizing guidelines, survey says, yep. Disparities in the gender, race, and sentencing are eliminated. Yep. Offender is automatically released once that sentence is served. Absolutely, because we know how long. And then finally, a range of time that includes a minimum and a maximum. Okay, so, but keep in mind what's most interesting is that you begin to understand is that with our range of sentencing that we had um, in our determinate sentencing in Illinois, we kind of took a little of the indeterminate sentencing. However, we wasn't indeterminate because we knew how long they could potentially. So we knew that if you went from 6 to 30, and 30 meant that you were really bad or you had been a repeat offender, then that meant that it didn't, by the way, and it didn't cut it in half. It didn't cut it in half like the old sentencing that we talked about, where 6 meant 3. 30 meant 30, okay? And so the point of the matter is it fit more in determinate as opposed to indeterminate sentencing, because we had an idea of saying, okay, so that's it for that. Your philosophy review, vocabulary review, you take the time to go over these and then you put them together, and let's just do this first one and then I'm going to call it a day. So remember one of the things, the descriptions of the philosophy is based upon deterrence, retribution, rehabilitation, and integration. All right, so which one presumes the public will be deterred from criminal activity because the punishment handed down to others? The idea that costs outweigh. Yeah, which by the way doesn't work. Refers to as an eye for an eye, values the concept of punishment fitting the crime that the punishment deserves. And then retribution, it's the punishment the convicted receives to deter them from continued activity, and it's retribution. So you got one wrong. I know which one was wrong. Specific deterrent is right, but you have to flip-flop these two. Oops, they won't let me do it. But anyway, so you have a chance to go forth, and you can do each of those, and then that will help you to get ready for it. But you have to flip-flop those two that I just said a few minutes ago. Okay. So now I'm at the end of the day. I want to talk about, what do you think a possible key phrase will be for today, or word? You know what? Okay, Trinity. All right. What are you looking at my notes? Can you see my notes on my desk? Or is there a camera over my shoulder? Because that's exactly right. You give me determinate or indeterminate sentencing, or both, and you get your points. That is it. That's it. So now I said it. Okay. I said what I said it is. I'm not going to repeat it. I said what it is. And if you give me that, what I said, then you will get your points. Okay, guys. That's too funny. But anyway, after a while, I'm going to say, everybody else can guess but Trinity. No, I'm not going to do that to her. Everybody says, nice, Trinity. Yay. All righty. I look at it, that name, Trinity, and I kind of shared that with her about the Trinity and what it means to me in my beliefs, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So I guess that's why you're getting these answers, is because you got all three of them working through you with your name. So, and that's a mark that your parents put on you. So, uh, okay, pretty cool though. Pretty cool. Truly blessed. Absolutely, that is absolutely correct. Well, all you guys are blessed, and I appreciate you guys, Jennifer, Jessica, Trinity, and everybody who comes out every week to be with me. And I'm going to say, enjoy your week and stay safe. And I will see you next week. Good night.